ladies and gentlemen. After the bloodbath yesterday, the Indian stock markets got a breather today. But is it a lull before a full-fledged storm? The tit-for-tat or tariff-pe-tariff war that is going on between US and China is refusing to die down. But Elon Musk reportedly tried to intervene, but President Donald Trump, it seems, is not keen to listen to the DOGE chief. The world is watching with bated breath because when US and China sneeze, the world catches a cold. And I'm talking about the trade war leading to possible fears of recession that are already raising their head in global economies. The fears are mounting. Where are we headed in this fight between the eagle and the dragon? Trump says, don't be a PANICAN, weak and stupid, but what should India do? What are the options? Let's find out. And joining me tonight on the News Hour, our esteemed guests, Betsy Stevenson, former economic advisor to President Obama and economics professor at the University of Michigan. Also joining me tonight, Jim Renacci, former GOP congressman and Republican leader. On the show is also P.K. Basu, independent economist, joining the News Hour tonight. Betsy Stevenson, I want to ask you first, what do you think of these trade wars? What do you think about the retaliation from China and a little bit of more muscle flexing from President Trump saying he's going to raise those tariffs with an additional 50%? Is this really pushing us into the middle of a tsunami that we haven't seen yet?
Well, I think we've actually started to see the tsunami. We saw the markets crashing on Thursday and Friday of last week. And, we saw some stabilizing that has started. Depends on where you were in the world, if your markets were crashing on Monday or stabilizing. But by the end of the American Monday, things were starting to stabilize and are looking a little bit better today. And the reason they're looking a little bit better is I think that there is hope. That there's going to be some kind of negotiations that's going to pull back these tariffs. When I talk to people about this, I think one of the things that, people focus on markets have crashed, so people have lost money or lost savings. That's terrible, but it's not what we should be paying attention to. What we should be paying attention to is what are the markets telling us? And they're telling us that all of these companies expect, a much lower set of sales going into the future, not just, this month or next week, but, or this year, but maybe even years into the future. And that's because the entire globe has benefited from the kind of trade arrangements that we've had. While President Trump has been focused on the fact that the United States he thinks of us as losing from trade, and so he really wants to sort of pull back American trade. I think it's a very misguided interpretation of what's happening with trade. There are a lot of Americans, particularly of President Trump's generation, who get mixed up about, we've seen a decline in manufacturing in the United States. They think a lot of that's due to trade. A lot of it's actually due to technology. I think President Trump he has had a vision in his head that he's going to bring, garment manufacturing, assembly lines back to the United States. Because that's actually, I think, not possible, we're going to have to see what he's able to get.
Absolutely, and that doesn't happen overnight. But Jim Renacci, I want to ask you, is this misguided? Because yes, MAGA was a major election promise, make America great again. And while nobody in the world has a problem with that, this bloodbath, is it giving indications of how the world is going to collapse if this kind of a tariff war really goes on, Mr. Jim Renacci?
Well, first of all, you got to remember that what we have here is uncertainty and unpredictability, which is what's driving the markets to act the way they are. But at the same time, we have a president who believes we're being treated unfairly, and he's using these tariffs to negotiate, to bring other countries to the table, and he's being successful. I mean, today he's announced 40 or 50 countries are now coming to the table to negotiate. I don't think this is a long-term issue. I think it is short-term. Look, I'm not a tariff person. I believe tariffs used for negotiations are important. I believe tariffs long-term are bad. But I think in the end, President Trump is attempting to bring other countries to the table for negotiations. That's what's causing the uncertainty. That's what's causing unpredictability.
But his friend Elon Musk is also nervous today. And those are the reports that we're hearing from American publications.
No, I would agree. I think the uncertainty, unpredictability is what's driving the uncertainty in the markets globally and in America. And I think in the end, you're going to see a president who's going to use this to negotiate. He will pull back at some point in time, and he'll get the best trade agreements he can for the country, for the United States, which I think is the end goal for him.
Okay, but Mr. Basu, if this carries on for a period of time, it would be doctors arrived, but patient is dead. What are we looking at? And especially from the Indian perspective, the Dow Jones has just opened slightly higher. Most economies, most stock markets, Nikkei, the Singapore markets, Hong Kong, all of them have shown some resilience today, including in India. But do you think this is going to be a turbulence for a longer period of time? And is it just about negotiations?
Well, it's about negotiation with most economies other than China. I think it's important to understand that China is not a market-based economy. China is a classic communist economy which believes in overproduction. Now, when the Soviet Union overproduced, it just built up massive inventories and had nowhere to sell that excess inventory. In China, the excess production is dumped on the rest of the world. And there is no doubt that this has caused serious problems around the world. You know, if you think about China, in 2007, 18 years ago, in March 2007, the then premier of China, Wen Jiabao, used the four uns. He said the economy is unstable, uncoordinated, and unsustainable because there was excess capacity in every industry already 18 years ago. And at that time, China was producing 400 million tons of steel, for instance. No other country in the history of the world had ever produced more than 125 million tons of steel in a year. Now, China has gone from 400 million tons in 2007, it went to 1,065 million tons in the year 2020. So this is the degree of overproduction. World steel production in the year 2000 was 840 million tons. Now, China alone produces way more than that. So this is, and then what happens is that China then dumps this on the rest of the world. So what Trump has been saying for 9 years on the campaign trail and as president is that he wants to redress this. He wants to bring manufacturing jobs back for the American working class. And J.D. Vance is a classic representative of that working class. He grew up in Ohio and Kentucky.
So are we in India purely collateral damage? Are we in India collateral damage between the war between US and China?
No, we are not. No, we are not. Look, we are not collateral damage at all. We have been negotiating already prior to the announcement on April 2nd. India and the US have been deep in negotiations over mutual tariff reductions. You know that Vietnam has also immediately offered to sharply reduce its trade and non-tariff barriers to US imports in order to have a mutual reduction in tariffs. So most countries recognize that the US market is very important to them, and it's silly to grandstand like the previous Canadian Prime Minister was trying to do. He's been turfed out. The current guy, he's got an election coming in 2 weeks' time, so he's trying to
Okay,
be
makes
rhetorically
sense.
tough. But in
Betsy,
the end, Canada, Mexico, Vietnam, India are all going to mutually reduce tariffs. They're going to mutually reduce tariffs with the US. The only one is China is a non-market economy, and the US is doing the work for us, for all of us around the world.
okay, that's one way of
we
looking
can
at it.
have
Betsy
manufacturing as
Stevenson,
well.
are you convinced with this argument, or do you think recession will hit globally countries before this issue with China is sorted out? I think you've muted yourself. Unmute yourself, please.
I absolutely adored your phrase, by the time the doctor arrives, the patient might be dead. President Trump has done so much damage already that even if he announces that he has made a bunch of great deals, next week or the end of this week, I think that there is already damage that's done. Honestly, if he doesn't announce that there are deals, I think we're actually going to see another real tanking of the markets. I think there's a lot of optimists who've already priced things in. The problem that the U.S. faces is not actually tariffs, and it's not just China. So there is a big China standing up to the United States because they're a big enough economy to do that. But the United States started, Trump started by saying he was going to put tariffs on Mexico and Canada. And that took a lot of people by surprise. And he went pretty hard after Europe. He's gone after countries where, let's take Vietnam. He put a 46% tariff on Vietnam. Vietnam has a 1.1% tariff on the United States. These aren't reciprocal tariffs. I do think that both he and J.D. Vance think that we should be, assembling and building things in the United States. J.D. Vance did not come from that background. I guarantee you the people in his community are not going to take those jobs. I don't think he understands what garment...
Mr. Basu vehemently raising his hand to rebut you. Yes, Mr. Basu.
Look, the reason why Canada and Mexico needed to be tariffed is simple. They were being used by China to penetrate the U.S. market. The maquiladoras along the U.S.-Mexico border are a means for Chinese companies to assemble things that are primarily produced in China and then sold into the United States. So that is why there was a tariff imposed on Mexico.
Okay,
Similarly, Vietnam,
Mr. Basu, I want you to put your money where your mouth is. Are markets in India going to tank tomorrow, or are they going to be resilient like they were today?
They are going to. I think the worst is over for markets. We've seen a massive sell-off. The sell-offs were overdone. Partly because of silly predictions of an impending global recession. Please understand that even Goldman Sachs was merely saying the probability of a US recession is 45%. That's less than 50%. So they are hedging. They are basically saying...
All right. Everybody is hedging their bets, but if the markets survive, if people's savings are safe, and this is only grandstanding to make China buckle, well, it seems like a plan. But Jim is smiling there. Seems like a plan. I just hope it goes that way. And, Betsy clearly doesn't really quite agree with that. But we'll wait and watch. At the moment, there are all kinds of people, some who are hedging their bets, some who are doing their doomsday prophecies, and others who are just holding their breath and waiting for markets to open tomorrow morning. Will they fall? Won't they fall? Will they fall? Won't they fall? Well, we'll bring you all the details soon enough. Thank you very much to all my guests for joining me on the News Hour tonight. With that, it's a wrap on the News Hour. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back not only analyzing markets and tariffs for you, but also bringing you the latest political news. Thank you very much. Good night.